The most decorated warship in Royal Navy history, served 30 years across 2 world wars, surviving 15 shell hits at Jutland, guided missile attacks, mines, and countless bombing raids, only to run aground defiantly while being towed to the scrapyard. HMS Warspite earned 15 battle honors, more than any single Royal Navy vessel, and her story encompasses nearly every major naval engagement Britain fought from 1916 to 1944. She holds records for the longest-range gunnery hit on a moving target and was the first ship to fire on D-Day. Her survival against impossible odds, combined with her dramatic final act of defiance, made her a legend among sailors who knew her as the Grand Old Lady. HMS Warspite emerged from a bold gamble by Winston Churchill and Admiral Sir Jackie Fisher that risked their careers. Laid down at Devonport Royal Dockyard on October 31, 1912, she was the second of the revolutionary Queen Elizabeth-class battleships, the world's first fast battleships, and the first capital ships powered exclusively by oil fuel rather than coal. Her specifications were unprecedented: 643 feet long, displacing 32,590 tons, armed with 8 15-inch guns capable of hurling nearly 1-ton shells over 24,000 yards. Her oil-fired Parsons turbines delivered 75,000 shaft horsepower, pushing her to 25 knots, matching the speed of battle cruisers while carrying armor up to 13 inches thick. Jane's fighting ships declared her class the most successful type of capital ship yet designed. Launched November 26, 1913 by Mrs. Austen Chamberlain, Warspite was commissioned on March 8, 1915 at a cost of approximately £2.5 million, over £300 million today. Her name derived from the Elizabethan word warspate, the green woodpecker that would peck holes in her enemies' hulls. Her motto, Belli dura despicio, I despise the hardships of war, would prove prophetic. She was the 7th Royal Navy ship to bear this name, inheriting battle honors stretching back to 1596. The Battle of Jutland on May 31, 1916, forged Warspite's legend through accidental heroism. Serving with the 5th Battle Squadron under Captain Edward Montgomery Philpotts, she engaged German battlecruisers at 18,500 yards, scoring hits on SMS von der Tann. But disaster struck during the run to the north, as British forces retreated toward Admiral Jellicoe's Grand Fleet. At approximately 6:18 p.m., steaming at 25 knots while avoiding her sister ships Valiant and Malaya, Warspite's steering jammed. A shell had struck near her port wing engine room, overheating the steering engine's thrust bearing and bending the telemotor gearing. Captain Philpotts faced an impossible choice: stop and become a stationary target, or maintain speed through uncontrolled circles. He chose to keep moving. Warspite completed 2 full circles directly toward the German high seas fleet, at one point closing to just 12,000 yards from enemy battleships. Concentrated fire from Derfflinger and at least 4 German dreadnoughts pounded her relentlessly. She absorbed 15 heavy caliber hits, shells of 11-inch and 12-inch caliber, and was holed 150 times by splinters. Yet this catastrophe became salvation for others. The armored cruiser HMS Warrior was being slaughtered alongside HMS Defense, which exploded with all 903 men lost. Just as Warrior faced destruction, the circling Warspite appeared, a far more valuable target. The Germans switched their fire, allowing Warrior to escape. Though Warrior sank the next day, her crew was evacuated safely. They believed Warspite's sacrifice was deliberate. Below decks, damage control parties fought flooding in engine rooms while Sub-Lieutenant Herbert Ansley Packer commanded A turret, the only one still operational, under local control, firing 12 salvos at the enemy. With rangefinders destroyed and the ship spinning, he kept fighting. After regaining steering control, Philpotts stopped for emergency repairs while the Grand Fleet's arrival forced the Germans to retreat. Warspite limped home alone, crossing the North Sea at night, evading 2 U-boat torpedoes that passed on either side, and even attempting to ram a surface submarine. She arrived at Rosyth without escort, still defiant. Casualties were remarkably light: 14 killed, 32 wounded. Among the wounded was Warrant Officer Walter Yeo, whose severe facial burns made him one of the first people in history to receive facial reconstructive plastic surgery, pioneering techniques still used today. Warspite underwent 2 major refits that essentially created a new ship. The first, 1924 to 1926, added torpedo bulges and upgraded anti-aircraft guns. But the reconstruction of 1934 to 1937 was transformative, costing £2,363,000, equivalent to £180 million today. Engineers replaced her 24 original boilers with just 6 modern Admiralty 3-drum units, reducing fuel consumption from 41 tons per hour to 27 at cruising speed, while saving 1,500 tons of weight reallocated to armor and armament. Her main turrets received modifications, increasing gun elevation from 20 degrees to 30 degrees, adding 9,000 yards of range for a new maximum of 32,300 yards. An aircraft hangar, catapult, and cranes were fitted amidships. New fire control systems and a massive armored citadel bridge completed her transformation. The reconstruction extended her combat effectiveness by over a decade, though sea trials revealed that steering problems from Jutland had never been fully resolved, a quirk that would plague her through World War II. On April 13, 1940, Vice Admiral William Whitworth led Warspite and 9 destroyers into Ofot Fjord for the Second Battle of Narvik, one of the Royal Navy's most decisive victories. 8 German destroyers stranded after seizing this vital iron ore port awaited destruction. At 11:52, Warspite catapulted her Swordfish floatplane L-9767 for reconnaissance. This single aircraft achieved extraordinary results. It discovered German submarine U-64 anchored 50 yards offshore in Herjungsfjord and attacked with 2 100-pound bombs. One hit sank the submarine, the first U-boat destroyed by aircraft in World War II. The Swordfish then spotted a destroyer hiding in ambush, allowing British ships to engage before the enemy could fire. When German torpedoes raced toward the fleet, the aircraft provided warning, all missed, exploding against fjord cliffs. Warspite's 15-inch broadsides destroyed Z-13 Erich Kullner in 3 minutes, with shells reverberating down and around the high mountains of the fjord. Chief Petty Officer Fred Jones, captain of B Turret, later described the terrifying psychological effect on German sailors watching their ships burn. By day's end, all 8 German destroyers were sunk or scuttled, representing 50% of the Kriegsmarine's entire destroyer strength. Warspite emerged essentially undamaged. Her ship's wheel was later presented by King George VI to King Haakon VII of Norway. It remains in Narvik City Hall today. In May 1940, Warspite became flagship of Admiral Sir Andrew Brown Cunningham, ABC, in the Mediterranean, beginning a partnership that would define both their legacies. At the Battle of Calabria on July 9, 1940, Warspite achieved what remains one of the longest-range hits from a moving ship to a moving target in naval history. At approximately 3:59 p.m. at a range of 26,000 yards, 24 kilometers, her 15-inch shell struck the Italian battleship Giulio Cesare's rear funnel, blowing a hole nearly 20 feet across. The impact started fires, forced 4 boilers offline, and reduced Italian speed from 27 to 18 knots. Admiral Campioni immediately ordered his fleet to disengage. A single shot had decided the battle. The Battle of Cape Matapan on March 28, 1941 demonstrated even more devastating firepower. British intelligence from Bletchley Park warned of Italian intentions, and Cunningham enacted elaborate deception, publicly visiting his golf club with a suitcase before secretly returning to board Warspite after dark. That night, the 3 British battleships, Warspite, Valiant, and Barham, close to 3,800 yards of unsuspecting Italian cruisers. At 10:20 p.m., searchlights, including those commanded by Midshipman Prince Philip aboard Valiant, illuminated the enemy. All 3 battleships opened fire simultaneously with 15-inch guns. Fred Jones recorded the slaughter with stopwatch precision. 22-27-55, opened fire with broadsides. 22-28-00, first cruiser hit, bursts into flames. 22-28-40, second broadside, target sinking. 22-29-18, third broadside at next cruiser. 3 heavy cruisers, Fiume, Zara, and Pola, and 2 destroyers were destroyed in under 5 minutes. Italian main turrets flew dozens of meters into the air. The Regia Marina lost 2,400 men, including Vice Admiral Carlo Cataneo. British losses, 3 killed. Italy's greatest naval defeat paralyzed their fleet. They never again challenged British dominance in the Mediterranean. At Crete on May 22, 1941, a 500-pound bomb struck Warspite's starboard side, killing 38 men and destroying her 4-inch and 6-inch batteries. Fred Jones had been standing at the impact point 1 minute before. Despite severe damage, she steamed to Alexandria under her own power, then sailed to Bremerton Naval Shipyard in America for repairs, arriving just weeks before Pearl Harbor. One Fritz X scored a direct hit near her funnel, penetrating 6 decks before exploding in number 4 boiler room. It blew a 20-foot hole in her hull bottom. A second bomb near missed, ripping open her torpedo bulges. Warspite took on 5,000 tons of water, losing all steam and power. Her guns fell silent, radar died, she sank 5 feet. Yet she refused to sink. Remarkably, no fires broke out, unusual fortune that saved the ship. With just 9 killed and 14 wounded, damage control parties stabilized her. American tugs took her under tow, though she broke all tow lines and drifted sideways through the Straits of Messina before reaching Malta on September 19th. Captain Packer was mentioned in dispatches for bringing her to port. Remarkably, this was the second time he had limped into harbor aboard a heavily damaged Warspite, having served as assistant gunnery officer during Jutland 27 years earlier. The Fritz X damage was never fully repaired. X turret remained inoperative, one boiler room stayed flooded. A concrete caisson covered the bomb hole, yet Warspite would fight again. On June 6, 1944, the battered veteran earned perhaps her greatest honor. HMS Warspite fired the first shot of D-Day. Operating with only 6 of her 8 15-inch guns functional and 3 of 4 shafts working, limiting her to 15 knots, she had a tug standing by in case her notorious steering failed. Yet at 5 a.m., 26,000 yards offshore from Sword Beach, her guns roared to life against German batteries at Villerville. Captain Marcel Kelsey invited personnel on deck to witness a sight you will never see again in your lifetime. During the morning, 3 German E-boats emerged from a smokescreen and launched 17 torpedoes at the Allied fleet. Warspite rained every caliber of shell possible down on the enemy craft. They fled. 1 torpedo passed harmlessly between Warspite and Ramillies, the only naval surface action of D-Day. Over 2 days, Warspite fired over 300 shells supporting Allied forces, then sailed to Portsmouth to rearm her exhausted magazines. By June 9th, she was back, supporting American forces at Utah and Omaha when U.S. Navy ships ran low on ammunition. On June 11th, she pounded German positions near Gold Beach, supporting the British 69th Infantry Brigade. On June 13th, 1944, becoming the first British battleship to transit the Straits of Dover since war began, Warspite struck a mine 28 miles off Harwich. Her propeller shafts suffered further damage. Maximum speed dropped to 15 knots permanently. The Admiralty relegated her to bombardment duties only. Her gun spoke for the final time at Walcheren on November 1, 1944, supporting the operation to open Antwerp. She returned to Deal the next day. Warspite had fired her last shots in anger, paid off on February 1, 1945. Proposals to preserve Warspite as a museum ship were rejected. Sold to Biscoe for scrapping at £101,275, she departed Portsmouth under tow on April 19, 1947, bound for Faslane. But the grand old lady had other plans. Off the Lizard, a severe storm struck. The hawser from Tug Bustler parted. Tug Matinda III slipped her tow. In gale force winds, the skeleton crew of 7 men watched helplessly as Warspite's anchor failed to hold in Mounts Bay. The storm drove her onto Mount Mopus Ledge, then, after briefly refloating herself, hard aground in Prussia Cove, Cornwall. On April 23, 1947, St. George's Day, the Penley lifeboat launched into 25-foot waves beating over the stranded hulk. Coxswain Edwin Madron brought his vessel alongside, holding position while each man timed his leap to the second as the lifeboat rose level with Warspite's decks on massive swells. Cheered by crowds watching from 200-foot cliffs, all 7 crew were saved. Madron received the RNLI Silver Medal. The gale did more damage to the Warspite in 48 hours than she had previously suffered in 2 world wars, newspapers reported. The romanticized narrative took hold. Britain's never-say-die warhorse had wrenched herself from tugs towing her to the scrappers in one final act of defiance. Multiple refloating attempts failed. In 1950, salvagers used 24 compressor tanks and 2 jet engines from an experimental aircraft to move the wreck just 130 feet closer to shore at Marazion, between St. Michael's Mount and Hoggus Rocks. Declared a total loss with insurers paying £150,000, Warspite was progressively broken up in situ until summer 1955, when she finally disappeared from view. HMS Warspite earned 15 battle honors, more than any single Royal Navy ship in history: Jutland 1916, Atlantic 1939, Narvik 1940, Norway 1940, Calabria 1940, Mediterranean 1940 to 41 to 43, Malta Convoys 1941, Matapan 1941, Crete 1941, Sicily 1943, Salerno 1943, English Channel 1944, Normandy 1944, Biscay 1944, Walcheren 1944. Ships named Warspite collectively hold 25 honors, also a Royal Navy record. Admiral Cunningham coined her immortal nickname in July 1943 after a fast run supporting the Sicily invasion. Operation well carried out. There is no question when the old lady lifts her skirts she can run. The name stuck. She survived shellfire, bombing, ramming, mines, and one of history's first guided missiles. She held records for the longest-range gunnery hit. Her Swordfish floatplane achieved the first aircraft U-boat kill of the war. She fired the first shot on D-Day, and when her time came, she refused to go quietly. HMS Warspite matters because she embodied something beyond steel and gunpowder, a spirit of defiance that resonated with the nation she served. Her 30-year career encompassed every major naval engagement Britain fought across 2 world wars. The men who served aboard her, from Walter Yeo, whose wounds pioneered plastic surgery, to Fred Jones, whose turret destroyed 3 cruisers in 5 minutes, to the 7 souls rescued from her stranded hulk, carried stories that connected generations to an era of decisive naval power. Today, her ship's wheel sits in Narvik City Hall. Her tompions rest in Portsmouth's Naval Museum. Teak benches made from her timbers grace St. Michael's Mount and Penzance Gardens. Some boilers remain visible underwater at 5 meters depth off Marazion. A memorial stone unveiled in 1992 bears the inscription, known to all who served aboard her as the Grand Old Lady, "May she with many gallant shipmates rest in peace." Chief Petty Officer Fred Jones offered perhaps the most fitting epitaph. She was eventually broken up where she lay by British workmen doing what the enemy failed to do. The Grand Old Lady despised the hardships of war, but she endured them all.